Okay, well, it's kind of a quick presentation, but I've prepared this for people that aren't familiar with two-factor authentication, so I'm not 100% sure if anybody is, but if you don't know who I am kind of qualified to talk about it. I'm Ursula Wilkinson. I work for CTS. I'm the Information Security Analyst for the campus. This is kind of in my wheelhouse amongst a lot of other things, but my job entails kind of looking at an environment and kind of analyzing risk, where we could do things to improve in terms of information security, and also from a technical standpoint as well, in terms of different kind of technical solutions for improving security. And two-factor authentication falls in that purview. So I'm going to explain a little bit about what that is, why it's important, and if anybody wants to turn it on today, I have some instructions prepared for you. It sounds super technical. It's kind of like a weird phrase. It really isn't all that technical. It's just kind of a way to, a better way to kind of prove who you are to a technical system. And you're probably already doing it right now, but maybe not realizing that you're doing it. The classic example is banking in an ATM. And I'll explain a little bit more about how that's the case. But when you go up to the ATM and you've got your card and your PIN, doing two-factor authentication. So you're already doing it. And it's basically just a better way of proving to some sort of system that you are who you claim to be. We call that authentication. And it goes into all sorts of technical solutions, citing into email everywhere. There's non-technical ways of authenticating to someone or a system. So when we talk about it in terms of technical systems, you're using more than one thing to log into an application like your email. So what exactly is a factor? It's something you know, something you have, and something that you are. When we talk about two-factor authentication, you think about signing into your email. Typically, you use a username and a password. A password is something that you know. When we're talking about two-factor, we're going to use another type of factor. We're going to use something you know and something you have. What you have would be your phone and an app that's on it, or one of these fancy little things, a USB device, something you have. So when you combine the use of more than one factor, we call it two-factor authentication. It's a more secure way of proving that you are who you claim to be. When you think of something that you are, they talk about biometrics, if anybody's heard about that, retina scans, fingerprint scanners. They have some really crazy things with facial recognition. Those are something about your physical being. And a lot of like really high security government offices and applications will use all three of these and call it multi-factor and require multiple of the factors to get into some of the systems. And it's got different types of names: multi-factor authentication or 2FA. It's kind of like an abbreviation for it. Google, that's the system for our email and Team Drive and all that. They call it two-step verification, but it's also abbreviated MFA. Those are all kind of talking about the same idea. So if you see those, it's the same thing. So why is it important? Something you know is easily stolen, and it's not really as strong a security mechanism as we need it to be. I'm sure that all of you have seen in the news, they hear about information breaches. What these people are after is usernames and passwords. So passwords, the something you know part, really just isn't secure anymore. It's kind of an outdated idea. People sell these on the dark web for money, and that's what people are after. They want access. They want usernames and passwords. So a lot of times people will, the hackers will get in, but they'll steal encrypted passwords. But when a password's encrypted, it's scrambled. You can't just type in the encrypted password at the login and have it work. But if they're stealing encrypted passwords, that's still bad. That doesn't mean your password's safe. And honestly, there's a lot of human weakness as a factor as why passwords aren't very good. We have so many that we need to remember, and we're constantly being told they need to be 12 characters, and they need to have an uppercase and a lowercase, and they have to have a number, and they need to have a special character. So, gosh, we have so many. It's really hard. You know, there's only so much that we can remember, right? It's really difficult. So we tend to try to make things easy on ourselves, and we'll reuse passwords, or we make them very simple, or very, very guessable. So a part of it is just our human nature as to why passwords are bad. And a lot of places will add security questions. Like I know my one bank does this to my chagrin. They will, you know, I have a username and a password for my bank, and then they ask me a security question. But security questions for these applications tend to be pre-configured, and they tend to be things that are easily rememberable for you, but that also means that they're probably in a public database somewhere. Like one of the questions in my bank is, what is your, it's a similar question, I can't think of it exactly off the top of my head, but what's your paternal grandfather's first name? Well, there's public databases that people can search for that information. So they steal your password, they get that question, they can go look it up, and boom, they're in. So security questions aren't that good, and they're still technically something that you know. That they're not a different factor. And we have so many logins everywhere for everything. Trying to keep track of passwords is really difficult. So that's why it's more important to combine a password with something that you have. And that's why two-factor is a better security mechanism than just using passwords alone. I won't necessarily take you through what can happen, but I can tell you that today, and I think it was actually technically disclosed yesterday, there was a new public credential dump of millions of records that have usernames and passwords in them. Now, what these hackers will do is that they'll kind of aggregate all the previous ones and kind of just add in their new one and pretend that it's a new disclosure. But this newest one has a lot of unique records already in it. There's a lot of security researchers that will go through these and kind of compare, just, you know, to try to keep people informed and to kind of track how this stuff, how hackers work and what their motives are. But again, just a brand new one with millions of records today. So it's happening all the time, and a lot of people that will reuse some of their passwords everywhere, they risk what's called credential stuffing attacks, meaning, hey, I've got this massive collection of passwords now that I know that people use. I'm going to try to use these passwords against all these different services with some of these usernames and see if anybody's reused them anywhere. Or, you know, if somebody used it, there's a chance that somebody else, a different person, may have used it for a similar reason. Let me try it and see if it works. They try to get into banking, they try to get into email portals. Anywhere and anywhere they think there's something of value to try to get into, they will try. So, and it doesn't take much, you know, once they get one password for you. I particularly worry about this scenario is somebody steals your email password, and then they try to use it. Okay, so they got into your email, but there might not really technically be anything of value in your email. It's not really true. They can get into your Google Drive contents as well. But then they try to use it against our campus VPN, and that's a big deal. The VPN allows you to authenticate from somewhere remote, and what it does is it allows you access as if you were physically on campus. And that's a big deal because when you're physically on campus, you have access to things that outsiders normally wouldn't, and that's a problem because there's a reason why you have to authenticate to do that. And if they can use the same password to get into the VPN and get access, that's a big deal. So that's just one scenario. Once they're in, hackers like to try to get footholds into other things. So then they can leverage that into maybe trying to hack Banner, or I'm trying to think of any other kind of, you know, our student information system, anything with sensitive information. They're going to try, like, every little foothold they get is better for them, and they can spend time trying to get into other things. So you think, oh, well, whatever, they've got my email password. It's a big deal because they can try to use it in other places and get in other ways. It's when you add that something you have, it makes it harder for them to get in, because at that point, then, you know, they try to get into your email. Oh, well, you know, I can't get in now because it's whatever system with the two factors is asking them for a code and I don't have it, so now they can't get in. Now, email's a different situation. Like when I was talking about the VPN, it's kind of a different scenario in terms of password reuse, but a lot of people store a lot of documentation and work product in Google Drive. So you think they're into just your email, but depending on what else is in there, it's still a valuable resource that they might want to get into. So,
can I ask a question just with that? So I recently changed my Oswego.edu email password, which then changed all my.
Yep.
So they are all the same.
Yes.
And then with the single sign-on, it's like everything is the same all through SUNY.
Well,
I feel like they
entirely.
used to be different.
And technically they are different, but we to make things easier for users, it will do the same for you, so it's the same everywhere. Now, there is the capability to make them different. It's just harder to manage. Like I do it, but it's hard for me to manage, and I do this every day. But technically they are the same because it's easier for people to remember one. Now, eventually we're going to be tying in two-factor authentication into that single sign-on so that a lot of those systems will be protected. It's a project that's upcoming. We haven't set a timetable for it. Eventually it'll be there. But you're right, it does get you into a lot of things. And it seems like it's risky, but there's a balance between security and usability that we kind of have to walk. Because if I had my way, like everything would be like Fort Knox, and you'd have to like.
So when I changed my email password, I didn't expect my banner password.
Banner, it's technically not its own system. It relies on your Laker.id password. So it does get synced. And even though Google doesn't use single sign-on to authenticate because of the way you set up the password reset tool, it syncs it amongst all those systems for you. And we do realize that is a risk, and we're going to set up that two-factor authentication for a lot of those things. But because Google doesn't tie into single sign-on yet, we kind of have some other implications. There's implications of other work that preparation that might need to be done before that, how we're going to handle that. But we are working. It's on our project list. So, but yes, it does. And technically, they are different systems. It is possible, and there are people that have different. But it's difficult for people to try to remember three. So we sync them. So what do? Anywhere that you can enable two-factor, do so. In most cases, it just takes a couple minutes to set up, and there's a lot of different services that offer it now because people are demanding it because it is such a high security risk. In most cases, and you don't even necessarily need a smartphone to do it, a lot of services have the capability to just, if you can receive a text message or a phone call, you can set it up. That's kind of like a bare minimum. But if you have a smartphone that has that you can have apps on, there are apps that you can install that will provide codes for you, and I'll go over that a little bit more too. Anything and everything that you can, email, including Laker apps, banking and financial sites, all your social media, most of them can be secured with two-factor now. Cloud storage like Dropbox, there's other ones too. Shopping like Amazon supports two-factor. Password managers, if you're using those, if you're familiar with what those are. It's kind of like a storage utility for all of your passwords so that you don't have to remember them, enabling you to have better passwords. But if you're going to use a password manager, you should secure it with two-factor. But productivity and communication apps too, like Office 365, WhatsApp, some of those secure messaging apps you can use with two-factor authentication. So anywhere and everywhere that is offered, you should do it. And there is a way that you can look that up. So if anybody wants to do that today, I can show you. I can walk anybody through it that wants to do it. I also have some instruction sheets printed up, very easy if anybody wants to share with their friends and family, because two-factor authentication is available for anyone with a Google account. So these instructions would apply to anybody else that has a Google account, not just like your apps. But again, they call it two-step verification, so don't get caught up in too much of the language, but it's the same thing. Google likes to brand their stuff with their own verbiage, but it's called two-step verification. Two-factor authentication for Laker apps is fairly easy to do if you use the web if you do it in a browser, like if you do it inside Chrome or Firefox. If you use a desktop email client though, like Mozilla Thunderbird or Outlook, there's some additional steps that you need to do, so we wouldn't be able to do it today. But again, there's more information about that in the packet if you want it. But if you strictly use the web browser and possibly with your smartphone, you can set it up today. But by all means, like I said, share. It's got information, other additional information about two-factor authentication, how it works in Google. And again, tell everyone and everyone to turn it on. So does anybody want to do that right now? Because I can walk everybody through how to do it. I don't know if anybody's prepared. No, nobody's prepared.
I don't have a phone, but I'd like to see how you can do it.
Okay. I didn't actually take it. So Google, how do you primarily access your email when you do it? Is it on a desk, like from your desktop? Okay. So two-factor authentication, there's a couple different ways to do it. You will want to take that with you, and I can work with you after too. You can use a landline with it.
I have a phone, I just don't have it with me.
Oh, okay. All right. How do you? There's a couple different ways to do it. Are you good with apps on your phone, or do you think you would rather get text messages? Okay. The instructions will be perfect, and if you want after, I can maybe visit with you if you want, because we're running out of time. But it's fairly easy to do. There's a Google setting that you go in and you turn things on. I don't have this document with me, but
so basically every time you log in, you're going to have to get it.
It's not every time, because there is a way for you to tell Google, especially if you're doing it from the same device all the time. You can tell Google to remember this device for 30 days.
It used to be, but mine somehow got shut off.
Well, depending on how your browser is set up, if your browser dumps all of its cookies when you close it out or when you restart your computer.
Or if you're a developer,
Yes. It depends on that cookie to remember you. So mine is set up to dump cookies every time I close the browser. I don't mind it. I know it bothers some people, but that's why it's happening. I know it sounds kind of like it kind of stinks, but if you don't clear out your cookies, it'll remember you for 30 days. And actually, yeah, so when you first set it up, you can turn that on. Yeah, right. I tend to do it, but I'll give this to you. There's some information on the front, but if you start walking through these, there's pictures for everything. Like when you first log in, you go here, and then it'll bring you to this window, and then you go here. And then there's the Google account settings. And then you go to sign in security. And then yours will probably be off. So you look for this two-step verification, it will be off. And then
pretty reasonable area.
yeah, it doesn't take long. It takes 5 minutes. And then you get started. And then when you go, so the default thing to set up is the phone. So at that point, you're going to set up a recovery phone. And then you're going to put in, you can either use the phone that you have or you can use your landline. It doesn't matter, because you can either send it, if you pick a landline, obviously you want to do a phone call. But if it's your cell phone, you can pick text message, and you have the two options. And then depending on what you choose, it's either going to call you or it's going to send you a text message. And it's going to want confirmation because it wants a text just to make sure it's gone through. And then you put in the code that you receive, and then it works. So then you have to actually, go through the final phase of clicking turn on, and then it'll show you that it actually is turned on. It'll bring you back to this window and show you the date that you turned it on. Now, once you turn it on, you'll want to set up a backup method. Now, if you use your cell phone, you could then pick a landline if you wanted to, as long as it's going to be close to where you typically work. You would want to do that. You can set up multiple backup methods too. I recommend people that don't have frequent cellular service to print off backup codes. The instructions are also in there how to do that. And then there's also a way that you can set up a smartphone app on your phone, and you kind of do an initial sync between Google and your phone. It gives you a barcode with like a seed value, and it's based on timing. But you don't need cellular service or Wi-Fi for that to work. It's called the Google Authenticator App. every minute it just generates numerical values. And even if you're in airplane mode, that thing's still spinning generating code. So that would be a good method if you ever need to sign into your email in a place that doesn't have good cellular service or Wi-Fi. Yeah, because that does happen. In fact, Sean Moriarty, the CTO, had that issue once. He couldn't get in. He was somewhere, and the cellular service wasn't very good. And he was standing at the top of the hill trying to wait for his text message to come in. But it was frustrating because that was the only method he had, and he was waiting for it, and we didn't have enough signal. I personally use the Google Authenticator App. There's information about that on the first page. I use that. I have pretty much everything that I have with two-factor set up to use the Google Authenticator App because that's a good way. It's a more secure way actually than using like text messages because and this is a little off topic, but high value targets like journalists and civil rights activists, and they have all these security concerns too. And because they're high value targets, hackers are really motivated to get into their email accounts. So what they've been doing is they've been trying to clone their phones to receive the text messages. So they have to resort to other more secure methods of two-factor. Now, for us, kind of everyday people, it's probably not a big risk. And certainly having any form of two-factor authentication, even if it's SMS text messages, is better than a password alone. That is 100% true. Even if you're a civil rights activist or a journalist for a controversial paper doing controversial work, you'll want to do something a little more secure, but for most intents and purposes, SMS text messaging is fine. But again, that's why I use the Google Authenticator app. It works everywhere as long as my phone's powered on, but I also do have the backup codes printed in a safe location, separate from my phone, separate from my laptop, so that in case my phone's dead and I don't have any cell signal, and I have a backup way of getting into my email. So the backup methods are explained in there as well. And if anybody does want more information about two-factor authentication, and I breezed over everything way too fast today, by all means, look me up, send me an email. We can create an appointment. I'm more than willing to walk you through it. The help desk also has instructions on how to do it too. So, but I'm more than willing to answer any questions that anybody ever has about this. So.